The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across our front yard, but the chill in the air had nothing to do with the autumn breeze. My son, Ethan, sat on the grass, his thin frame trembling, tears streaking his pale cheeks as he clutched the empty space where his beloved guide dog, Max, should have been. His sobs, raw and broken, cut through the stillness of the neighborhood like a blade. I stood frozen, my pulse hammering in my ears as I watched Officer Daniels, a man I had seen patrolling Pine Hill Estates for years, shut the door of his patrol car with a dull thud. Inside, Max, a gentle and highly trained golden retriever, whined in confusion, his wet nose pressed against the glass. "Please," Ethan choked out, reaching his arms toward the car as though sheer willpower could bring his dog back. "Please, don't take him." The officer hesitated, glancing between my son and Margot Bennett, the HOA president, who stood with her arms folded, her expression smug. "Officer, what exactly is happening here?" I finally found my voice, stepping forward, my judge's instincts kicking in despite the boiling rage in my chest. "Mr. Carter," Margot interrupted before the officer could respond. "There have been multiple complaints. Max is an unregistered animal, and according to Pine Hill's regulations, unauthorized pets must be removed." I turned my gaze on her, leveling her with the same look I had used in my courtroom when questioning unreliable witnesses. "Max isn't just a pet. He's a certified service animal. Federal law protects his right to be here." Margot sighed dramatically, shaking her head. "Well, I'm afraid HOA rules are quite clear, and—" "Dad," Ethan whispered, gripping my sleeve. "Please, stop them." I looked at my son, his hands shaking, his breathing erratic, and I realized this was not just about a dog. It was about his dignity, his freedom, and his right to exist in this community without fear. Margot had never hidden her disdain for us. From the moment we moved into Pine Hill Estates, she made it clear that we were an unwelcome disruption to her perfectly curated neighborhood. Our home, nestled among the manicured lawns and pristine driveways, was supposed to be a place of refuge. I had chosen Pine Hill for its excellent schools and promise of a tight-knit community, hoping to give Ethan a fresh start. But from day one, Margot had seen us as nothing more than an inconvenience. At first, it was subtle pointed glances when Ethan walked with Max, whispered conversations that stopped when we approached. Then came the warnings about excessive noise, even though Ethan and I lived quietly, the letters about unsightly modifications when I installed a textured walkway to help Ethan navigate our driveway. But this was a new level of cruelty. "I don't understand," Ethan had once asked me after being turned away from the community pool. "Why do they hate Max so much?" I had wanted to tell him the truth. That it wasn't about Max. It was about him. About the fact that his blindness made people like Margot uncomfortable, that she saw his presence as a stain on the picturesque perfection she so desperately clung to. But I couldn't. Instead, I had placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder and promised, "We belong here just as much as anyone else." Now, as I watched Margot smile while my son wept, I knew I was done playing by her rules. For 20 years, I had upheld justice from the bench as a federal district court judge. I had seen countless cases of discrimination, had ruled against landlords who refused to rent to disabled tenants, businesses that violated ADA laws, and institutions that turned a blind eye to prejudice. And yet, here I was, watching my own son become a victim of the very injustices I had spent my life fighting. I had deliberately kept my profession private when we moved here. I wanted Ethan to have a normal life, to be seen as a teenager first and not as the son of a judge. But Margot had forced my hand. I clenched my fists at my sides, my mind already calculating my next move. Margot thought she was above the law. It was time to remind her otherwise. Ethan had already lost too much. A year ago, a car accident had taken his mother's life and his sight in the same cruel instant. One moment, we had been a family, laughing, making plans for the future. The next, I was gripping his hand in a hospital room, listening as doctors explained that the damage to his optic nerves was irreversible. He had been drowning in grief, retreating into himself, unwilling to leave his room. It was Max who had finally brought him back. I remembered the first time Ethan held Max's harness, the way his fingers trembled as he traced its straps. The tentative step he took, then another, as Max guided him with gentle certainty. Max wasn't just a dog. He was Ethan's lifeline, his bridge to a world that had gone dark. And now, That bridge was being stolen from him. It started with an envelope, slipped under our door with no return address. Violation notice, unauthorized animal on premises fine, $750 immediate removal required. My hands had trembled as I read it, not from fear, but from rage, the same rage I had felt in courtrooms where I watched laws twisted to oppress the vulnerable. I gathered every document I needed: Max's certification, a copy of the Americans with Disabilities Act, medical letters verifying Ethan's need for a service animal. When I requested a meeting with the HOA board, I walked in fully prepared. Margot barely glanced at the paperwork before shoving it back with a dismissive smirk. "Your situation doesn't exempt you from our covenants," she said coolly. "Some residents find certain disabilities unsettling." I had to grip the table to keep myself from reacting. "The Americans with Disabilities Act protects my son's right to have his service animal," I replied evenly. "Federal law supersedes HOA regulations." Margot exchanged glances with her board members before leaning in. "We've had other residents attempt to claim special status before, Mr. Carter," she said. "This is an exclusive community. Our rules maintain our standards." I narrowed my eyes. "That's Judge Carter." A flicker of recognition passed over one board member's face, but Margot remained unfazed. "Well, Judge Carter," she said smoothly, "this isn't your courtroom. And let's be honest, perhaps Pine Hill just isn't the right fit for your situation." The words hung in the air like a loaded gun. As Ethan and I walked out of that meeting, he asked me, voice small, "Are they going to make us leave?" I looked down at him, at the boy who had already endured so much, and made a silent promise. No. I would not let them drive us out. They had underestimated us. And they had no idea who they were dealing with. The harassment didn't stop after the meeting with the HOA board. If anything, it escalated. A week after our meeting, I noticed something strange. Brand new security cameras had been installed on houses around the neighborhood. At first, I thought nothing of it. But then I noticed a pattern. Every single camera was positioned to face our home. "Dad," Ethan murmured one evening, standing at the living room window, "why do I feel like we're being watched?" Because we were. It didn't stop there. Every time Ethan and Max stepped outside, people appeared, phones in hand, filming. Whispers followed him wherever he went. Then came the complaints. 3 separate anonymous reports were filed with Animal Control, claiming Max was aggressive. Each time, an officer arrived at our door, citing concerns about a dangerous dog. Each time, Max sat calmly beside Ethan, his tail wagging, his posture perfect. The officers always left apologizing, saying the accusations were baseless. But the damage was done. Ethan, once so eager to reclaim his independence, began hesitating before stepping outside. "They hate me," he whispered one night as I tucked him in. "They think I don't belong here." His words gutted me. Before the incident with Max, Ethan had been making progress. He had started taking short walks alone, attending community events, trying to find his place in this new world he was forced to navigate without sight. But after the HOA's harassment, he withdrew again. The final blow came when he tried to join the other neighborhood teens at the community pool. I wasn't there, but a neighbor who had witnessed it told me everything. Ethan had approached the pool entrance, Max by his side, excited to finally spend time with kids his age. But before he could step inside, Margot herself intercepted him. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she had said loudly, ensuring everyone heard. "Due to liability concerns, all special needs residents require parental supervision at the pool." He had been humiliated. When he got home, he didn't say anything. He just took Max to his room and shut the door. That night, I heard muffled sobs through the walls. I sat in the darkness of my own room, staring at the ceiling, rage burning inside me. This wasn't just about discrimination anymore. This was psychological warfare. And I had seen enough. I began documenting everything. I saved emails, voice recordings, and every HOA letter. I compiled timestamps of harassment incidents and obtained statements from the few brave neighbors willing to speak up. But I didn't just rely on my own knowledge. I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my court clerk. "Clear my docket for the next week," I said. "I need time to handle a personal case." The second call was to James Holloway, one of the best civil rights attorneys I knew. "I need you to help me take down an HOA, I said. James let out a low whistle. "Lucas, you never ask for help. This must be serious." "They're tormenting my son," I said flatly. "And they just made the worst mistake of their lives." 2 days later, a letter from the HOA arrived. It was worse than I expected. New rule: all animals must be registered with DNA samples. New requirement: residents with special accommodations must submit monthly medical updates. New mandate: all service animals must wear muzzles in common areas. Total fines on our account: over $5,000. I gritted my teeth as I read the final warning. Further disputes may result in lien proceedings against your property. They were threatening to take my home. That night, I found Ethan sitting in the dark, Max's head in his lap. "They want us gone because I'm blind, don't they?" His voice was so quiet, it nearly broke me. I knelt beside him, running a hand through his hair. "They want us gone," I said, my voice hard. "But they're the ones who will be leaving." The day it all came to a head, I was in court handling a case when my clerk rushed in, eyes wide. "Judge Carter, it's an emergency. Your son just called." I grabbed the phone. "Dad," Ethan's voice was shaking. "They're here. The police. Animal control. Margot's saying Max attacked someone. They're trying to take him." I could hear the chaos in the background. Margot's sharp voice, Ethan's panicked breathing, and worst of all, Max whining in distress. "Stay calm," I told him. "Put Max on his lead. Show them his vest and ID. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I broke every speed limit getting home. When I turned onto our street, my stomach turned. A crowd had gathered. Officer Daniels stood by his patrol car, the back door open. Inside, Max sat, whining. Ethan was on the lawn, gripping his white cane, his other hand reaching toward where Max had been. Margot's voice rang out. The dog lunged at the Patterson boy. "We've had concerns for months." Ethan cried. "That's impossible. Max was on my left the whole time. He never breaks position." Margot sniffed. "See how emotional he gets. This is exactly the kind of instability we're concerned about." I parked and got out slowly, my heart pounding. "Officer," I said, keeping my voice measured, "may I ask what's happening?" Daniels shifted uncomfortably. "We've received reports of an aggressive animal." Margot folded her arms, smirking. "Finally, someone is taking this seriously." I exhaled, controlling my fury. "Officer Daniels," I said, "what evidence supports the claim that Max attacked someone?" A small boy, no older than 6, was nudged forward. His big brown eyes were confused. "The dog looked at me," he said. "Silence." Ethan let out a strangled noise, somewhere between a sob and a laugh. Max whined. I stepped forward, steel in my voice. "Officer, before you continue, I have information that will change how you proceed in the next 30 seconds. Margot scoffed. "Don't try to intimidate him." "I'm not." I removed my jacket, pulling out my credentials. "I am Judge Lucas Carter, Federal District Court. That dog is a certified service animal protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. What is happening here is a violation of federal law." Silence fell. Officer Daniels' eyes widened. Margot's face drained of color. "I have documented every instance of harassment," I continued. "Today's incident will be added to a federal civil rights investigation." Margot stammered. You never said you were a judge." "You never said you were targeting my son because of his disability," I shot back. "Yet here we are." I turned to the crowd. "For those recording, please continue. This is evidence." Officer Daniels cleared his throat, stepping back from the patrol car. "Judge Carter, I deeply apologize. I was misled." "Yes," I said. "You were." The car door was opened. Max bolted out, straight to Ethan. My son collapsed onto the grass, clutching him, sobbing. I turned to Margot. "You deliberately falsified reports. You scheduled meetings when I was in court. You have engaged in systematic discrimination." Margot paled as her phone buzzed. Calls from the HOA board. From attorneys. From reporters. The tide had turned. The fallout from that day was immediate. Within hours, video footage of the confrontation had spread through the neighborhood. The once silent residents of Pine Hill Estates began to talk. Neighbors who had never spoken up before were suddenly eager to share their own grievances against Margot Bennett and the HOA. I didn't have to do anything. The truth unraveled on its own. A mother stepped forward, revealing how Margot had pressured her to keep her autistic son inside because his meltdowns made the neighborhood look bad. Another resident, an elderly veteran with PTSD, admitted he had been forced to pay thousands in fines because his service dog looked intimidating. One by one, the stories came out. By the next morning, Margot's phone was undoubtedly flooded with calls, not just from angry homeowners, but from the other HOA board members. They had followed her blindly for years, but now that her actions had put them in legal jeopardy, they scrambled to distance themselves. That night, the HOA called an emergency meeting. The clubhouse was packed, more people than I had ever seen at a neighborhood event. It was clear that Pine Hill was no longer silent. Margot sat stiffly at the head of the table, but the smirk she always wore was gone. She looked around at the faces of people she once controlled and knew her time was up. The vote was swift and unanimous. Margot Bennett was removed from her position as HOA president. The rest of the board, equally complicit, followed. When she stood to leave, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. No one met her gaze. No one spoke to her. For the first time, she was the one who didn't belong. While Margot lost her position, my fight wasn't over. I filed an official federal complaint against the HOA for violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. Within weeks, the Department of Justice launched an investigation. But Margot's problems didn't end there. My friend, civil rights attorney James Holloway, took on the case pro bono, not just for Ethan, but for every resident who had been victimized by Margot's reign of terror. The evidence was overwhelming. Harassment complaints, false reports to animal control, illegally imposed fines on disabled residents, intimidation tactics. The HOA was fined heavily, but Margot herself faced personal legal trouble. Several families, including mine, pursued lawsuits against her. Her real estate license was suspended, and she was barred from holding any future leadership roles in HOA organizations. Justice was not just served, it was cemented. With Margot gone, Pine Hill Estates transformed. A new HOA board was elected, made up of residents who wanted real change. The discriminatory policies were repealed. The absurd fines were refunded. But more importantly, Pine Hill shifted from a place of fear to a place of inclusion. Ethan was no longer seen as an outsider. Neighbors who once turned away now stopped to chat. Kids who had ignored him now invited him to hang out. He was no longer the boy with the dog. He was just Ethan. And Max. Max became something of a local celebrity. The once feared, dangerous dog was now the community mascot. Families stopped by to pet him. Children begged to walk him. He was even featured in the neighborhood newsletter with the title Pine Hill's Favorite Resident. One day, Ethan and I walked to the community pool together. This time, there were no whispers, no glares, no Margot standing at the gate to block his way. Instead, a group of kids waved him over. "Come on, Ethan," one boy called. "We saved you a seat." For the first time since moving to Pine Hill, my son belonged. One evening, months after the dust had settled, Ethan and I sat on our porch, watching the sun dip below the tree-lined streets. He ran a hand over Max's golden fur and turned to me. "Dad," he said, his voice thoughtful, "losing my sight taught me something." I waited, letting him find his words. "We don't choose our challenges," he said, "but we do choose how they change us." I swallowed past the lump in my throat. He wasn't just talking about himself. For years, I had seen justice as something that happened inside a courtroom. I believed the law alone was the force that made things right. But justice had happened on my front lawn. In the voices of neighbors who finally spoke up. In the hands that reached out to welcome us instead of push us away. Justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about creating something better. And sometimes, it starts right at home. Life in Pine Hill was different now. Not perfect, No place ever is, but better. Fairer. Ethan thrived. He became an advocate, starting an accessibility committee for disabled residents. He held workshops on how to accommodate service animals. He even got invited to speak at his school about his experiences. As for Margot, she moved away in disgrace, leaving behind the wreckage of her own making. But we stayed. Because Pine Hill wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was home.